The Venezuela oil crisis. In the early hours of January 3, 2026, President Donald Trump made a dramatic announcement. He claimed that U.S. forces had carried out a decisive operation against Venezuela's leadership and that President Nicolás Maduro would face U.S. federal charges. If fully confirmed, it would represent one of the most aggressive U.S. actions in Latin America in decades. But whether or not every detail unfolds exactly as described, one question dominates this story. Is this really about drug trafficking, or is it about oil? Let's examine the verified facts. The official explanation: criminal charges. U.S. prosecutors have unsealed a federal indictment accusing Nicolás Maduro and senior Venezuelan officials of narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and weapons offenses. According to the Justice Department, these allegations stretch back more than 2 decades and include claims that Venezuelan state actors worked with regional criminal networks to facilitate cocaine shipments moving through Venezuela toward the United States. The indictment references cooperation with armed groups and organized crime networks operating across northern South America. These are serious accusations, and they are not new. Similar charges were filed during Trump's first term in 2020 and again expanded in later years. But context matters.
A credibility problem. Just weeks earlier, President Trump issued a pardon to Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras, who had been convicted in U.S. federal court on large-scale drug trafficking charges. Federal prosecutors had presented evidence that Hernandez accepted bribes from trafficking organizations and facilitated the movement of massive cocaine shipments through Honduras. That decision immediately sparked criticism from legal experts and anti-corruption groups, who argued it undermined U.S. credibility in the fight against narcotics trafficking. That decision has led many observers to ask a difficult question. If combating cocaine trafficking is the driving force behind U.S. action in Venezuela, why pardon a convicted trafficker so recently? That contradiction is central to the skepticism surrounding this operation. The oil numbers that change everything. Now let's turn to the data that reshapes this entire story. Venezuela holds approximately 303 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, according to international energy estimates. That makes it the largest oil reserve holder in the world, surpassing Saudi Arabia. Those reserves account for nearly 18% of known global oil supply. By comparison, the United States holds roughly 45 billion barrels. Most of Venezuela's oil sits in the Orinoco Belt, a massive region of extra-heavy crude that requires specialized refining technology, but represents one of the most valuable energy assets on Earth. A collapsed oil industry. Despite its enormous reserves, Venezuela's oil production has collapsed. At its peak in the late 1990s, Venezuela produced more than 3 million barrels per day. Today, production hovers around 1 million barrels per day, less than 1% of global output. Experts point to multiple causes: underinvestment, aging infrastructure, loss of skilled workers, corruption and mismanagement, international sanctions. Venezuela's state oil company has acknowledged that many pipelines and facilities have not been meaningfully upgraded in decades. Independent analysts estimate that restoring production to historical levels would require tens of billions of dollars and many years of work. During a recent press conference, President Trump said that major U.S. oil companies would be prepared to invest heavily in rebuilding Venezuela's oil infrastructure if conditions allowed. That statement drew immediate attention and concern.
The Citgo factor. Another critical piece of this story is Citgo Petroleum Corporation. Citgo operates 3 major oil refineries in the United States, with a combined capacity of roughly 800,000 barrels per day, making it one of the largest independent refiners in the country. Although originally an American company, Citgo has been owned by Venezuela's state oil company since the late 1980s. In December 2025, a U.S. court approved the sale of Citgo's parent company to help satisfy billions of dollars in Venezuelan debt claims brought by international creditors. The timing is notable. Within weeks of that ruling, U.S. officials escalated actions against Venezuela's leadership while publicly emphasizing oil infrastructure and production. Global power politics. Venezuela's oil industry is not isolated. Over the past 2 decades, Venezuela has formed energy partnerships with Russia, China, and several European firms. Russian and Chinese investments have played a major role in keeping parts of the industry functioning despite sanctions. Following Trump's announcement, Russia's foreign ministry condemned the U.S. action as a violation of Venezuelan sovereignty. Iran issued a similar statement. From a geopolitical standpoint, control over Venezuela's oil does more than impact energy markets. It reshapes influence in the Western Hemisphere. The unanswered question, what comes next? Even supporters of strong action against Maduro agree on one thing. Removing a government is only the first step. What happens next is far more important. President Trump suggested that the United States could oversee a transition period in Venezuela. However, no detailed roadmap has been released outlining who governs during the interim, when elections would occur, how sanctions would be lifted, how humanitarian needs would be addressed. Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado has called for internationally supervised democratic elections and has significant public support inside Venezuela. But Trump has publicly expressed doubts about her leadership, raising concerns among democracy advocates about whether a genuine civilian transition is being prioritized. Without a clear plan, history shows that power vacuums often lead to instability, not democracy.
The human cost. The Venezuelan people have already paid a devastating price. More than 7 million Venezuelans have fled the country over the past decade, making it one of the largest displacement crises in modern history. Any transition that prioritizes resources and geopolitics over democratic legitimacy risks deepening that humanitarian disaster. The cocaine trafficking allegations may be real. The indictment outlines serious claims that deserve legal scrutiny. But when you consider Venezuela's unmatched oil reserves, the collapse of its energy infrastructure, the timing of Citgo's court-ordered sale, public statements emphasizing U.S. oil investment, and the geopolitical impact on Russia and China, it becomes impossible to ignore the broader strategic picture. This story is not just about crime. It is about energy, power, and who controls one of the most valuable resources on the planet. What happens next will determine whether Venezuela moves toward genuine democracy, or simply experiences a change in who benefits from its oil. The world will be watching. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me what you want fact-checked next. And as I always say, thank you for watching, and may God watch over you.